Discover the incredible moment a single dad janitor inspired a millionaire with his Dutch call. Frank's hands trembled as he wiped down the gleaming marble lobby, his eyes capturing fleeting glimpses of the suited elite that passed by. They were wrapped in their own worlds, their polished shoes clicking against the floor, each step echoing the chasm that separated them from him. A janitor in a prestigious tech firm, Frank felt every day like a shadow in an office painted with ambition, the laughter of professionals drowning out the weight of his own silence. The burden of single fatherhood rested heavily on his shoulders, the meager paycheck barely sustaining him and Emily, his daughter flickering like a distant star with big dreams. Glimpses of her bright smile would flicker through his mind as he trudged through corridors lined with trophies of success that would never belong to him. With each cleaning cart he pushed, the walls loomed with untold ideas and innovations, mocking him as he scrubbed away the excess of those who would never acknowledge him. Violent thoughts of how their lives would differ with even slight financial freedom consumed him. Would Emily attend college? What if she had the chance to soar on her own wings? The notions of a better life clashed violently against the reality of his paycheck, a twisted knot in his chest. But a spark ignited that evening, amidst the remnants of a lavish corporate gala, a conversation that punctured his mundane existence. Bold entrepreneurial ideas, the Dutch call. They echoed in his mind, pregnant with potential. The words trailed after him like whispers in a dark night, persistent and insistent. He combed through the internet in the quiet hours, his heart racing as he unearthed inspiration he'd never thought possible, a vision of a sustainable energy solution that could redefine industries. Yet fear clung to him like a second skin. What would a janitor know of innovation? Would they scoff at his humble proposal, belittle him? The laughter of polished professionals rang like a death knell in his mind. Torn between the despair of invisibility and the flicker of hope, Frank's thoughts spiraled. Each moment he bravely nurtured his dream was met with crushing doubt. He could barely match strides with the dreams he nurtured in a dimly lit kitchen, where he and Emily spent countless late nights whispering aspirations over instant ramen. "Dad, you need to go for it," Emily encouraged one night, her optimism a beacon in the dark. Her belief in him was a fragile thread he clung to, sweeping aside the haunting question of whether he should even try. As days bled into each other, the very idea of pursuing those dreams fed a tempest of internal conflict. Each layer unraveled slowly, revealing the uncomfortable truth that would rise within him, hopes and fears coiling around one another in an agonizing embrace. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. After weeks of nocturnal research and gnawing self-doubt, he stood before the towering glass doors of the boardroom that housed the very CEO of the firm he cleaned. As he gazed at the stark reflections of his ragged visage, fear flooded his senses. His heart thudded like a war drum in his chest, the clinks of corporate triumph ringing hollow around him. He hesitated, reflecting on their past. The CEO had woven a path of success. He was Frank's childhood friend, once a shared bond, now twisted into a world ruled by social hierarchies. As he entered, the board's expectant gazes bore down on him, and the memories of their carefree days raced through his mind. Frank's breath quickened, caught between the past and the overwhelming anxiety of the moment. The familiar face, now surrounded by suits and accolades, seemed to mock him, a reminder of a division shaped by time and circumstance. Everything he had fought for surged within him, clashing against the gnawing fear of rejection. Could a janitor with a dream truly inspire change? Would the board listen, or would he remain the invisible man in a world too lofty for his reach? The tension curled tightly around him as he took a breath, ready to confront not just the doubts of those in the room, but of his own heart. The battle lines were drawn, and the air was thick with unspoken potential. Would he rise to face the challenge, or shrink back into the shadows? The choice hung heavy, unresolved, as the boardroom loomed with opportunity, filled with questions that could define his future and that of Emily. Frank could feel the weight of every eye in the room, each gaze a benchmark of his worth against theirs. The polished surface of the massive conference table reflected back not just light, but also the reality he had been painstakingly avoiding. He was the janitor, the shadow known only for his mop and bucket,
But in this moment, he wanted to be more. He had to be more. "Frank, isn't it?" The cool, calculating voice of the CEO sliced through the air, bringing forth memories of laughter shared over homemade lunches. Now that shared past felt like a silent mockery as he nodded, the weight of both nostalgia and purpose crashing down upon him. We expected to see a report on the recent environmental initiatives, not a janitorial proposal. Something startled awake inside him, a resilience he had begun to doubt. "Actually, I have something different in mind," he began, his voice quavering but resolute, the moment of fragile balance between fear and determination.
He reached into his pocket, fishing out a wrinkled piece of paper that contained the blueprint of his idea. The vision was not merely a hope for financial stability. It had morphed into a conviction about changing the way the industry viewed sustainability. As he laid the paper down, silence filled the room. The executives leaned in, curiosity etched across their features, but it wasn't enough. The gnawing fear that his vulnerability would flay him publicly snaked its way back to the forefront of his mind. Was it wise to expose the depths of his aspirations to a crowd that had never considered him more than a mere maintenance worker? "Let's hear it," the CEO prompted, his voice steady yet probing. It felt like a gauntlet thrown down. If Frank hesitated now, he could disappear back into obscurity. With a deep breath, Frank straightened his back, feeling the rush of emotions, doubt, hope, anticipation, crashing within him like waves against jagged rocks. He began to speak about his concept for a new, eco-friendly energy solution, explaining its potential impact on not just the company's bottom line, but on the community it served. He articulated the details with a clarity he hadn't anticipated having, his passion igniting as he spoke. Each word became a little more confident, a little more self-assured. As he continued, the board's expressions shifted, concentration weaving through initial disbelief. Frank could see their interest brewing, their curiosity peaking. He could feel his own internal barriers crumbling, the shadows that had defined him dissipating in the light of possibility. "I know that I might not come with the credentials or the background many of you hold," he said, pushing against his external defenses. "But sometimes the most profound solutions come from the most unexpected places. Aren't we supposed to embrace innovation, to disrupt the dull chorus of traditional thinking?" A silence followed that felt like an eternity, yet it was saturated with potential. He had extended an invitation into his world, a messy world colored by challenges deeply rooted in survival and the love for his daughter. All the recollections of numbing nights spent second-guessing his endeavors began to unravel, leaving the core of his aspirations bare. "That's an interesting perspective, Frank," the CEO replied, a shifted tone evident in his voice. Something had shifted, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the humanity behind the janitorial uniform, a single thread of threadbare ambition woven into the fabric of this austere boardroom. But would it be enough? Frank's heart raced, the moment teetering on the edge of collapse or elevation, waiting to see if his small step into visibility would be matched by the courage of those who had often overlooked him. Then, another board member spoke. The look in her eyes was fierce. "It's a bold idea," she declared, leaning closer. "But what do we know about you, Frank? What are your qualifications to lead this initiative?" He hesitated, caught off guard. The spotlight suddenly felt like a burden again, pressing down on him like the night's endless worries. Did he have the credibility to back his vision? Could he muster the confidence to answer that question and sustain the attention of those who had deemed him unworthy? Before he could wrestle with his response, a clear thought emerged. He realized then that he had something far more important than credentials. He had lived experience, fierce dedication, and a dream fueled by love for Emily. As the board members watched expectantly, Frank understood that this was not merely a battle for acceptance, but also a reckoning with his own doubts. The time had come to face the truth of his unusual power. But beneath that realization lay a gnawing awareness. The deeper question still lingered. Was he willing to risk everything? The comfort of the shadows, the safety of anonymity, for a chance at a future that felt so heartbreakingly close, yet agonizingly out of reach? The poised smile of the CEO loomed like a lighthouse, holding the promise of resolution. Yet Frank knew the next moments would determine not just his fate in this room, but the very future he held for Emily. And then, as if the universe conspired to amplify the intensity, they asked him a question that would shape everything. "What comes next, Frank?" Frank's mind raced, every thought battling for priority in that pivotal moment. The question echoed, a charged electricity surrounding him. What comes next? His lips felt dry, words clamoring for order, but all he could hear was the steady thrum of his heartbeat, a reminder of both his vulnerability and his resolve.
He didn't have a plan laid out, no strategic pitch full of financial forecasts. He only had an unwavering belief in his idea, a vision nurtured amid years of menial tasks and late-night worries. "I understand you might not see me as typical," he began, breathlessly searching for the words that connected the past to this critical juncture. "But sometimes those who stand on the sidelines can see what the players don't. I've worked here long enough to know the cycles of this business. Every choice we make impacts not just our profits, but our planet, our community. My idea isn't just about energy, it's about legacy." The board members leaned closer, their skepticism slowly crumbling. He felt something shift inside him, a blend of hope and defiance. Every fiber in his being now propelled him forward, ignited by the possibility that he could be seen as more than a maintenance worker. The CEO leaned back, arms crossed, an expression that hinted at contemplation. "A legacy is a grand vision, Frank, but what specifics do you have? How do we shift from traditional operations to align with this energized aspiration of yours?" Frank's heart pounded, not merely from the question, but from the clarity that had emerged through his naivete.
We could introduce a pilot program for solar energy conversion on our rooftops. It's not just about reducing our energy costs, it's about a commitment to a greener future. I envision local partnerships with educational institutions to train the next generation on sustainable practices. Yet, even as he spoke, doubt flickered like a candle in his mind. Was this enough? Could a proposal born from his daily grind withstand the rigorous demands of corporate scrutiny? He caught his breath, urged by an internal battle to believe in his own worth. He had more, didn't he? Yes, we can optimize our operations along the way. We can engage with local waste management to recycle more efficiently. A flush of excitement coursed through him, each new detail emboldening his resolve. It's about community. It's about being proactive rather than reactive. The response was silent yet palpable. Board members exchanged glances, not dismissive or doubtful now, but engaged and intrigued, a sight he had long glimpsed but never truly faced. Maybe, just maybe, he was finally given a chance to reclaim the narrative of his life. Yet lurking behind the facade of newfound confidence was another persistent question, one he had avoided facing deeply. What if they laughed? What if they rejected the sincerity baked into his every word? What if they saw only the janitor and not the vision? That invisible sense of fragility tugged at his sleeves, anchoring his spirit in reality. The shadows of self-doubt yawned wide beneath the surface. Clearing his throat, he pressed on, fueled by both fear and excitement. But if we initiate this passionately and strategically, we can truly show that we aren't just a business, but a responsible entity connected to our environment. Just imagine if by embracing this change, we could lead the industry rather than follow it. The CEO raised an eyebrow, a sly smile threatening to break through. Leading sounds ambitious, Frank, especially for someone who has only taken the steps that we dictated for so long. Are you ready to be more than just the janitor? Are you prepared to face potential backlash? His breathing quickened, and he felt that familiar adrenaline surge. Every obstacle they had laid before him became a stepping stone. It was all contingent on this one decision, to step into the unknown and forge ahead. "I am," he replied, his voice steady, bolstered by an emotion that felt new, clarity. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." And just as the air in the room thickened with silent anticipation, Frank realized the stakes had changed. They were no longer mere spectators. Now they were part of his unfolding narrative. But as the discussions turned among the board members, a looming figure leaned back, casting a shadow of skepticism. What would it take to fully convince them? What rebuttals would be raised? And how would he respond? Just as the CEO leaned forward, ready to steer the conversation, Frank still wrestled with lingering fears, sensing that this was merely the prelude to his greatest challenge. Would he hold firm in his resolve when the stakes revealed themselves to be greater than he imagined? The tension was no longer just a circumstance of the meeting, it was a reflection of his transformation. Could he truly elevate this encounter into something transformative, not just for himself, but for everyone around him? Then, moments after his question had hung in the air, another voice emerged, sharp, unyielding. "What do you really want from us, Frank? What vision are you willing to fight for, and how far are you willing to go to make it happen?" And with that, the stakes rose even higher, the path less illuminated yet compelling. Frank understood that the journey was beginning, and it could lead to power or collapse depending on how he navigated the currents ahead.
Frank's pulse ricocheted in his ears, and the room seemed to shrink as the CEO's words cut sharply through the atmosphere. How far was he willing to go? The question played over and over in his mind, morphing into a sharp blade of conviction. He took a deep breath, his mind racing back to the past few years, a blur of night shifts spent grappling with the monotony of his job, juxtaposed against the clarity of his vision. It felt both like a lifetime and the blink of an eye. Beneath the fluorescent lights, serving others had left him feeling invisible. But here, on this precipice, he understood he was no longer just a figure in the shadows. He had something to offer. "Everything I've done up to this moment has led me here," Frank replied. His voice carried a weight he hadn't intended to lend it, but it felt necessary. "I want to show you that we can lead change." The CEO's eyes narrowed slightly, scrutinizing him as though searching for cracks in his resolve. Lead change, yes, but inspiring a company to pivot? That's a heavy ask. How will you handle skepticism, pushback? You'd have to own every decision. Frank stiffened at the implication. He would no longer be merely a janitor with ideas, but rather a potentially polarizing figure who would face fierce opposition. Did he even have that capability? Suddenly, he felt a rush of memories, the battles he fought with his son, teaching him to stand up for what was right, despite what others said. In the face of different challenges, he became a better man. It dawned on him that he had been training for this without even knowing it. "Of course," he asserted, allowing the conviction to flow through him, "but I'll have the support of the team behind me, staff who need to see that the company is set on progress and positivity. I would also seek allies outside these walls, experts in sustainability who can attest to the urgency of this shift." The board members hadn't expected such resolve from him. He noticed their taut expressions soften briefly.
There was a flicker of respect, maybe even intrigue, curling through the midst of their critical gazes. "All right," said the CEO, momentarily pausing to absorb the potentiality of Frank's claims. "So what's your proposal for escalating these ideas beyond strategy room discussions? What tangible actions can we take in a defined timeline?" Frank seized the chance. "We could implement a 3-phase plan. Phase 1 could be a comprehensive audit of our energy usage, gathering data that reveals where our inefficiencies lie. Phase 2 would demonstrate pilot projects that others can replicate. And Phase 3, we can create an educational outreach program targeting other businesses and institutions, inspiring them to make similar moves." The moment he outlined the phases, a new current coursed through him, an awakening of self-gratification. The confidence coiled around the catalyst he had brought forth. He could breathe new life into what had once felt stifled, transforming doubt into motivation. However, shadows still lingered. The CEO leaned back, an inscrutable expression framing his face. Visionaries are often dismissed unless they come with proven ideas and results. Are you ready for that challenge? Frank narrowed his eyes, steel creeping into his posture. "I'm not seeking approval anymore. What I am offering can change lives if given the opportunity, even if my approach isn't conventional. I refuse to be cast aside because of my title." The pulse in the room changed. Frank could feel it. An unfamiliar energy united their stares, creeping with anticipation. He sensed that they were wrestling with a new notion, a common ground between tradition and innovation, fueled by an atypical champion. But beneath the rising tempo were the undercurrents of anxiety and doubt. He feared more than mere rejection. He feared that he wouldn't be strong enough to see this vision through against established norms. As the discussions began swirling again amongst the board members, Frank caught wind of their uncertain whispers and shifting expressions. If they grasped even a fraction of what he was projecting, perhaps they were ready to break free from their constraints. But could he truly inspire them to see the light in this dark room? Then the CEO turned back sharply, breaking through Frank's burgeoning hope. "Are you willing to put everything on the line for this? Your job, your reputation?" The implications of the question bore down like a thunderous weight. Frank inhaled deeply. This was the reckoning. He felt the air tremble, charged with possibility, yet laced with peril. "Yes," he uttered resolutely, aware that this might change everything. In that fleeting moment, his heartbeat echoed, morphing into a resolve made of grit and determination. The stakes had never felt higher, and yet the potential for a new beginning shimmered like a threshold before him, beckoning him to step across. But the question lingered. What if crossing that threshold meant losing everything? What if this fight took him to places he never intended to explore? Was he prepared to pay the ultimate price for the legacy he envisioned? As the board members continued to deliberate, Frank could feel the world shifting beneath him, teetering on the edge of an irresistible tide. Would he ride that wave into uncharted waters, or drown in the weight of his ambitions? Frank stood at the precipice of decision, the CEO's gaze piercing him like a spotlight as the weight of his words settled in the air. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, a reminder that this moment might redefine what it meant to be Frank, the janitor who dared to dream like a captain steering an uncharted ship. In that electric atmosphere, he could see lingering skepticism amongst the board members, but he also sensed a flicker of curiosity igniting within them. They were contemplating a shift, and he had to capitalize on this rare opening. If he didn't seize it now, would he ever find another chance? Let's dig deeper, he thought, needing to tighten his grip on this nascent momentum. How can I position these ideas to resonate with their fears and desires? Frank took a moment, drawing from his experiences balancing fatherhood with the grind of nightly shifts, crafting strategies that would lead not only to safety but also success for his son. His voice steadied as he spoke again. Change can be daunting, especially for those at the top, he began, algorithmically piecing together his next thoughts. But think about what it has meant for you, personally, as stewards of this company. What if, by embracing this change, we not only maintain relevance, but actually set the standard for the industry? The board shuffled slightly, shifting at the notion of leading rather than following. Frank held his breath, letting those words linger. This was it. He had to echo the narrative that would elevate both the company and his own standing. The CEO raised a brow, reconsidering. What guarantees do we have that this will resonate with our employees, let alone our customers? Your strategies are ambitious, but ambition without foundation often crumbles. Frank recognized the challenge, but refused to shrink back. We will create that foundation through engagement. Employees must feel part of this journey. Workshops, feedback sessions, even small pilot initiatives can serve as building blocks for a larger vision. After all, everyone has a stake in the outcome. Their voices matter, and together we can harness their collective power. As the board members exchanged glances, Frank felt a surge of unexpected clarity. He wasn't just selling a strategy, he was fostering a new culture, one rooted in collaboration and shared purpose. The tension in the air shifted subtly, but a faint hint of doubt still encircled the room like a mist, something unwritten that he had yet to address.
Frank, aware that he could no longer spare any fragments of timid thought, leaned forward, letting his resolve wane into vulnerability. I understand the stakes. Trust me, if this fails, I will take full responsibility. But if we succeed, no one will just see me as a janitor anymore. They will see the value in collaborative change. He could almost hear the gears in their minds whirl in unison, grappling with the form of authority he suddenly embodied. The reaction surprised him. The slightest nod from one board member felt less like acquiescence and more like a spark igniting a fuse. I'll invite some of our youngest employees to the meeting next week, the CEO finally said, breaking through the palpable weight hanging between them. They often bring fresh perspectives. Let's see if they share your enthusiasm. Expectations shifted with that simple acknowledgement, like puzzle pieces locking into place. But Frank felt a shiver run down his spine. Was he gambling too much on their response? As the meeting wrapped, he lingered behind, absorbing the aftermath. Would bringing those fresh voices mute the pushback he anticipated? Would they align or conflict with the hesitation he sensed from the more entrenched board members? In the ensuing days, he would prepare not just for a presentation, but for potential confrontations that could shatter the fragile alliance he had forged. His vision demanded nurturing, not only from those in power, but from the peers he had tirelessly worked alongside, peers who might still see him as little more than a janitor. Frank resolved to get to know his colleagues better, strategizing on ways to involve them in this unfolding narrative. This expedition would not only foster unity, but perhaps unveil strengths within himself he had yet to acknowledge. However, beneath the excitement lay an insidious fear. Was he truly ready to cultivate a new identity, one that could withstand the storm of doubt typically cast by those who lingered in privilege? Feeling the pull of personal stakes unlike any he had felt before, Frank prepared for a clash of wills he could not yet fully foresee. The time had come to face not only corporate traditions, but the internal turmoil echoing in his mind. As he mulled over contingencies, he realized he wouldn't navigate this transition alone. But what awaited him in the meeting with those fresh faces? Would they serve as allies or unwitting barriers to his burgeoning authority? Each moment dripped with anticipation, ready to plunge him into the depths of conflict, resolution, or both. Days crept forward, each one heavy with anticipation.
Frank felt like a tightrope walker, teetering between confidence and the unsettling specter of doubt. He had committed to this new journey, not just for himself, but for those who saw their reflections in his struggles. The young employees would soon be brought into the fold, and he needed to prepare for the unpredictable currents they would introduce.
He spent late nights researching strategies that engaged employees, sifting through countless articles, case studies, and interviews. Knowledge flooded his mind, but with it came a nagging apprehension. What if he faltered under their scrutiny? What if the very employees he hoped could help were dismissive of his ideas? Such thought patterns circulated ceaselessly, each loop delving deeper into his fears. To dispel those doubts, Frank decided to approach a few of his coworkers informally. He approached Lucy, a tech-savvy employee with an animated enthusiasm for innovation. "Mind if we chat over coffee tomorrow?" he asked, masking the anxiety within his request with casual bravado. The moment they met in the break room, Lucy's bright smile put him at ease. As they sipped their drinks, Frank shared his vision in broad strokes, careful to frame his excitement as an invitation to collaborate. "I believe we can cultivate a culture of engagement that starts with listening to everyone," he proposed. Lucy leaned toward him, intrigued. "What do you suggest? We launch a survey or hold a brainstorming session?" The sparks in their conversation ignited a creative fire within Frank. He hadn't anticipated this enthusiasm from Lucy, nor her willingness to examine the company's culture. Each minute spent discussing possibilities unveiled insights he hadn't acknowledged. He realized that the more he opened up about his plans, the more it resonated with his peers. Employees felt empowered when engaged in the conversation. But amid their budding camaraderie, a disquiet simmered. Would they rally behind him once the critical meeting loomed? Frank sensed a duality within himself, the hopeful leader eager to foster change, and the nagging janitor still haunted by doubts. It both thrilled him and sent chills down his spine. The next day, as the meeting approached, Frank surveyed the room where the board gathered, an eclectic mix of veteran executives and fresh faces. His heart raced as he stood at the door, ready to speak, yet tethered by an invisible rope of intimidation. Memories of mops and midnight cleanings flooded his mind. Could he truly command respect in this setting? As the young employees entered, their energy washed over him like a wave, buoying his spirits. Their presence was a reminder that they had been through tough times as well, gathering experience from the trenches. A sense of unity flourished even before the meeting began, but it was soon eclipsed by the understanding that everything could change in an instant. Once seated, Frank caught the CEO's eye, the formidable gaze fixing upon him as a test. "You'll need to articulate your vision clearly," he thought, steeling himself. The anticipation pulsed like a racing heartbeat between him and those around the table. As the meeting began, he introduced each young voice, allowing them space to share ideas and perspectives.
To his surprise, their feedback melded effortlessly with his own, interweaving his vision with newfound insights. This collaborative spirit cracked open the door he'd hoped they would charge through together. The stark divide between his janitorial role and the corporate giants evaporated slowly, revealing the potential for evolution. But it wasn't without commentary. Skepticism still lingered. "You can't just expect everyone to jump on board based on feelings," one board member asserted, crossing his arms defensively. In that moment, Frank sensed a challenge to the foundation he was trying to lay. Adrenaline surged as he faced the tightening grip of fear. "You're right, we can't solely lean on emotions. That's why I insist on structures, feedback sessions to guide our transformation," he countered, forcing himself to remain composed. Deep within, a realization struck him. He was no longer just defending an idea, he was asserting his right to belong. Yet, lurking beneath the surface was the possibility that today's interactions could lead to resistance, an invisible barrier formed by ingrained attitudes. Would his efforts crumble under the weight of tradition? As he glanced at the young employees, glistening with potential, Frank felt emboldened. It was clear, today was a pivotal moment, but the conflict had only begun. Could he genuinely cultivate a culture of change that sailed beyond these boardroom walls, or would the winds of doubt drag him back down? With the meeting ongoing, Frank held on to a glimmer of hope, feeling the walls close in around him. Each question was a test of resolve, and he wouldn't know the outcome until the final word was spoken. What would his next challenge be? A confrontation with the steely board member, or an opportunity to embrace the shift he so desperately sought? Frank's voice resonated in the room with a newfound strength, but doubt clawed at the edges of his confidence, a relentless whisper urging him to retreat.
Each question from the board members confronted him like an unexpected wave, testing both his resolve and his understanding of leadership. The disbelief reflected in some of their eyes felt like an icy wind, but the warmth radiating from the younger employees ignited his determination. As he navigated through their skepticism, Frank leaned into the collaborative essence of the moment. "Can we establish weekly feedback sessions?" he proposed. "Allowing everyone to voice their concerns on these initiatives will help us bridge gaps and keep us accountable." His heart raced, awakening the lingering remnants of doubt within. Had he overreached? But Lucy's nod of approval bolstered his courage. She's seen the potential. Maybe others would too. The discussion shifted in tone, with some board members intrigued, others still wary. Yet he felt the undercurrents of change surging forward, the possibility of something larger taking root within the company's fabric.
"You're proposing a feedback loop. That's daunting," the critical board member interjected. Frank noted the underlying challenge in his tone. This was the moment for conviction. He couldn't afford to falter. "Change is always daunting," he replied, suppressing the tremor in his voice. "But isn't that what innovation entails? If we want our culture to evolve, we must be willing to unearth discomfort and utilize it to grow. It's not just about us. It's about the company's future and the younger generation shaping it." The words poured forth, a flood of passion cloaked in purpose. Slowly, the room began to shift. Tension softened. The ice started to melt. These seasoned executives were no strangers to change. Perhaps it was his position that made his viewpoint resonate differently. Frank dared to hope that he was no longer merely a janitor in a suit, but a voice representing the future. As the meeting continued, a sense of camaraderie blossomed. Frank was aware of the internal struggle he had faced. Every question turned inward, reigniting old insecurities about his place. Yet he recognized that leadership didn't hinge on titles. It lay in the willingness to listen, adapt, and learn. His heart raced, but with every heartbeat, a realization dawned. He would not back down. Following the meeting, the board members buzzed with conversation. The critical voice had been tempered, and instead of closing ranks, many voiced their willingness to explore the pathways he created. The unexpected cohesion offered validation that he hadn't fully anticipated. But as the excitement surged, a shadow lurked. Frank's thoughts drifted back to the voices that still questioned his credibility. Had he truly transformed their perspectives or merely manipulated their curiosity? What would happen once the novelty wore off and they reverted to old patterns? Those questions gnawed at him, reminding him that his journey was far from over. Determined to gather more momentum, Frank began drafting a plan to implement the feedback sessions. The stakes were high. He felt the weight of responsibility, not just to himself, but to the team who believed in him. In the following weeks, he laboriously crafted each session's framework, delving deeper into the methodologies of engagement strategies. The act of writing crystallized his thoughts, but it also exposed his vulnerabilities. What if, after all his preparation, he still fell short? That doubt dragged at him, but he pushed through, leaning into every avenue he'd explored in recent weeks. He reached out to Lucy, hoping her technological savvy could transform his ideas into executable steps. Their collaboration unveiled a deeper understanding of the employee's needs, dissecting and reorganizing feedback into tangible initiatives. But time raced ahead, and with each passing day, Frank felt the clock ticking toward the next board meeting. Would the winds of support continue to swell, or would doubt rear its head again as the initial enthusiasm waned? As the final preparations unfolded, Frank rehearsed his presentation, each word echoing with the weight of expectation. He had embraced the challenge once, but could he sustain this momentum? With a deep breath, he prepared for the next chapter, one that would either solidify his place or threaten to unravel everything he had built. The day of the follow-up meeting arrived, charged with anticipation and anxiety. As he stood before the board once again, the question loomed large. Would his message penetrate the armor of skepticism, or would the lingering doubts sabotage his efforts anew? The atmosphere in the boardroom hung thick with tension, every figure seated around the polished mahogany table embodying a blend of skepticism and cautious anticipation. Frank could feel the weight of their collective gaze. It was piercing, a tangible reminder of all the doubts swirling in his mind. Could he truly ignite a fire of change? As he cleared his throat, flashes of memories cascaded through him, endless nights spent in the quiet company of a mop and bucket, reflecting on his life's inconsistencies while listening to distant echoes of corporate conversations. He had wanted to belong, to be heard, yet here he was, at the heart of the table, attempting to steer the ship he had long been on the periphery of. "Thank you all for coming together today," Frank opened, his voice steadier than he felt within. "I want to revisit the idea of our feedback sessions. These won't just be a mechanism, they'll be a lifeline,
an opportunity to blend diverse perspectives across all levels. With each word, he harnessed the energy of a room filled with seasoned professionals who had once seemed beyond his reach. The critical board member leaned in, his brow creasing with scrutiny. "And you believe that employees will be candid enough to share their real thoughts? Isn't there a risk here?" Frank sensed the subtle challenge beneath the surface. Risk is inherent in any meaningful change, but I believe that fostering an environment of trust and respect will encourage open dialogue. The words grew louder in his mind, each line delivered not just for their ears, but for his own growth. As he spoke, Frank found himself shedding layers of insecurities. The room slowly warmed around him, the critical member's visage softening as the light of understanding flickered. He was drawing from a well of shared human experience, rather than merely an employee's viewpoint. With his heart pounding in rhythm with the fervor of conviction, he unrolled a chart detailing the frameworks for the feedback sessions. "Imagine this as a collaborative journey," he urged, translating the abstract into the tangible, one where each voice informs our path forward. Yet, as the words flowed, doubt began to resurface in the corners of his mind.
What if they saw him as a mere janitor, a temporary fix within an established hierarchy? That haunting question lingered, yet he pressed on, accentuating the value of every layer within the organization, from the intern to the executive. "I want us to be innovators in our field. That requires all hands on deck. By actively listening and valuing each other's contributions, isn't that how we truly elevate the company?" The room shifted again as nods began to ripple among the younger board members, the initial reluctance wearing thin. Frank sensed the momentum building. The air became charged with the electricity of possibility. But as excitement burgeoned, so too did fear. He recognized this delicate surface. One crack might send the entire composition tumbling. "Let's not let this be another fleeting idea," Frank continued, sensing the collective energy. "I propose a pilot session. Let's gather data, measure engagement, assess outcomes. If it falters, I will own that failure. But it's time we tried something different." That last admission felt both liberating and terrifying. He looked into the eyes of Lucy, who appeared already poised to support him, further solidifying his confidence. Yet he couldn't shake the gnawing question of whether he had prepared himself adequately for every possible reaction. As discussions began to unfold, Frank felt a creeping realization. He was changing, stretching beyond his original role. Leadership was messy, uncertain, and yet thrilling. The weight on his shoulders transformed into a mantle of accountability he was ready to shoulder. The meeting concluded with a mix of skepticism and guarded optimism, dialogue sparked by his initiative igniting energy across the boardroom. As Frank stepped out into the hallway, adrenaline coursed through him. He had gathered the courage to voice his vision, but doubts loomed on the horizon still. What if this was a fleeting moment of perception? Maybe they'd revert back to the comfort of their original skepticism. What would it take for them to truly trust his leadership, to embrace the continuous journey of transformation? He would have to dig deeper, confront that fear head-on, and explore the limits of his influence. As he left the boardroom, Frank felt a shift within him, like a long, hidden flame sparking to life. Today was just the beginning. The reality was that the next steps would demand resilience, perhaps even a confrontation with the very people he once viewed as adversaries. He paused at the exit, a single thought punctuating his resolve. Could he balance the mantle of influence with the humility of doubt? The time had come to face that very question head-on. Frank's heart raced as he exited the boardroom, the impact of his words still reverberating in his mind. The flickering hope he had felt was not just a product of adrenaline. It was a deeper recognition that he was capable of influencing change. Yet, along with those burgeoning feelings of power, came an unsettling reality check. He was deliberately positioning himself in unfamiliar territory, wresting the reins from a culture steeped in tradition and hierarchy. Finding a quiet corner alone, Frank closed his eyes. He envisioned the faces he had just addressed, each representing a narrative woven into the fabric of the company. The hardened expressions of the board members loomed in his mind, displaying skepticism tainted with traces of curiosity. He could offer a new perspective, but to do that, he had to delve into the parts of himself he had only just begun to understand. "Can I actually lead them?" he muttered under his breath, grappling with the perpetual tug-of-war between doubt and determination.
The voices of his past crept back in, echoes of those who had dimmed his light, reminding him of the janitorial closet he had crawled out from, and the stigma that tugged at his heels like a shadow. As he took a deep breath to steady himself, the words of the session began to solidify into something actionable. He grabbed his notebook from the office, flipping through pages that bore not just ideas, but vulnerabilities. Each bullet point represented a foothold toward elegance in his approach. They demanded scrutiny and reflection. What if he could elevate his coworkers' experiences by making those sessions a safe haven for creativity? Pulling out his phone, Frank opened a note-taking app and began jotting down strategies for implementing the feedback sessions. His fingers danced over the screen as he considered how to alleviate the apprehensions of his peers. What if he reached out individually to share his vision for the first time, foster collaboration before the bigger forum? But his phone buzzed, breaking his concentration. It was Lucy. "Can we chat?" The text was simple, yet it sent a ripple of anticipation through him. He felt an immediate connection and trust in her insights, propelling him to the glass-walled meeting room. As he entered, Lucy stood facing the window, her silhouette framed against the late afternoon sun. She turned to him, concern etched across her face. "I couldn't help but notice how tense the meeting felt," she began, her voice laced with warmth. "You stood strong, demonstrating conviction during your proposal, but I sensed some hesitation from the others." Frank hesitated, playing the moments back in his mind. "I did what felt right, but I could feel the swell of doubt creeping back in. Did I misread the room? Are they actually on board, or was it just polite nodding?" Lucy approached, her gaze steady and reassuring. "You asked for trust from them, but trust needs to be cultivated. There's more to winning over this crowd than just a meeting. You have the vision, but you might need to share your story too. They need to see that you're not just a janitor offering a change. You're a leader with roots, experiences, and understanding."
Her words ignited something within him. Frank realized he had been so absorbed in reshaping the company's culture that he had neglected to share his own journey. Perhaps it was time to merge the personal with the professional, revealing the backstory that shaped his worldview. "Do you really think so?" he asked, a hint of doubt still creeping in despite her encouragement. "I worry they'll just see me as that guy, a maintenance worker trying to play in their sandbox." "Exactly," Lucy replied with emphasis. "That's what makes your voice valuable. You represent a realm they often overlook. Your experiences can challenge their assumptions. Show them the man behind the position, and you might just shift their perspectives." Taking in her encouragement, Frank felt the dawning realization that vulnerability could be his greatest strength. Unpacking his past would not only amplify his authenticity, but might also inspire action from others. "I think you're right," he said slowly, determination replacing hesitance. "I'm going to share my journey with them, open up about why I believe in this change so passionately." Lucy smiled brightly. "That's the spirit. People connect with sincerity, and your story will resonate. Just remember, taking a leap is always scary, but sometimes that's where the greatest growth occurs." As he walked out of the meeting room, Frank felt as if he was finally stepping into the shoes of the leader he aspired to be. The weight of his narrative would guide him, giving shape to the changes he envisioned. But as he returned to his desk, he realized that confronting his past was merely the first chapter. Unraveling his story would demand more courage than he ever anticipated. Would his truth be received with open hearts, or would it reignite the skepticism he had just begun to soften? With that thought echoing in his mind, he understood that the next step would require more than courage. It would test the very essence of who he believed himself to be. The moment of reckoning loomed large on the horizon, and with it, a silent promise to reveal the man behind the role. The day arrived, shrouded in a mix of excitement and trepidation. Frank felt the weight of his decision to share his story during the next board meeting, knowing it was a pivot point that could either forge deeper connections or unravel his emerging authority. As he entered the boardroom, he saw familiar faces, executives adorned in polished suits, sharp pens ready to critique, a sea of skepticism waiting to be transformed. The atmosphere pulsated with anticipation. Frank could feel the whispers of doubt sneaking back into his mind as he took his seat. Was he truly prepared to unveil the fears and dreams that lived beneath the surface? He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the memories of late-night conversations with Emily, each buoying him with hope. "Thank you all for returning today," Frank began, his voice steady but softer than before.
I want to revisit our conversation about the feedback sessions, but first, I need to share something personal that informs my vision. As the words flowed from his mouth, he felt a newfound strength guiding him. For years, I've carried the title of janitor, invisible to most, except for the smudges on the marble floor I cleaned every night. But that title does not define my dreams, nor does it diminish my purpose. He paused, glancing at the younger employees sitting nearby, their eyes reflecting hope and curiosity. Frank recalled the laughter during shared lunches, reminding him that he was not just speaking to executives, but to a collective eager for change. I'm not just here to clear the mess left behind. I'm driven by a vision to leave this company better for everyone who walks through these doors, from employees to customers. His vulnerability stripped away the walls he feared might separate him. I have a daughter, Emily, who inspires me every day to break through limitations. She dreams of a world where the focus is on sustainability, where we can nurture our planet. I see her future, and I recognize the responsibility to create opportunities not just for her, but for all of us. This is why I believe deeply in the changes we can make. He watched the board's expressions shift. Curiosity replaced skepticism, and he felt their barriers lowering. Each shared moment of his journey had transformed from an act of vulnerability into a bridge of authenticity. This isn't just another proposal, he continued, voice gaining momentum. It's a legacy that can unite us as a company, fueling our purpose while leading to genuine innovation. I want to hear your thoughts, concerns, but more than that, I want us to engage together in this transformative process. The room fell into a contemplative silence, but the air buzzed with potential. As he faced the scrutiny of the board, the critical member spoke up. Your story is inspiring, Frank, but how can we ensure that translating this culture shift into the workplace will resonate? How do we get everyone on board? Frank could feel the urgency of the moment wash over him. Change isn't just about buying into an idea. It's about how we build trust, he countered, some of the tension lifting from his shoulders. We need to create dedicated spaces where everyone feels comfortable sharing, spaces for honest feedback, where we can collectively review our successes and failures. Hearing diverse voices will fortify our approach. He saw nods around the table, a flicker of interest awakening within. These seasoned professionals weren't merely skeptics. They were people capable of recognizing value in his earnestness. The CEO leaned back, an impression of contemplation written across his face. You would lead those sessions? He asked, testing Frank's commitment to this vision. Yes, Frank replied fiercely.
I would fully invest my energy into this project. Everyone deserves the chance to contribute to what lies ahead. It's a risk for me, but this endeavor could crystallize us into something powerful. The room manifested a new dynamic, one that invited discussion rather than skepticism. As the dialogue deepened, voices poured in, crafting layers of strategy that resonated across both new and established employees. Ideas intertwined, filling the meeting with a shared sense of empowerment, anchored by Frank's audacity to lead from his unique position. Days turned into weeks, and under Frank's guidance, feedback sessions blossomed, igniting excitement and collaboration with palpable energy that swept through the halls of their workplace. Employees from various departments began to actively engage, sharing proposals that further pushed their shared mission of innovation and sustainability. The janitor, once overshadowed, transformed into a respected leader driving connection and engagement. As he walked through the corridors of the building, Frank noticed a change not only in how others perceived him, but in how he viewed himself. He carried a sense of accomplishment that transcended titles, an internal validation stemming from forging paths of influence, mentorship, and positive transformation. The night spent cleaning had transitioned into a past that shaped his resilience and determination. Recognition came swiftly. Weeks later, at a company-wide meeting, the CEO presented Frank with an award for his innovative leadership, the applause resonating like a symphony ringing in harmony with his heart. He had conquered not just the challenges imposed by others, but the battles within himself. Standing before the company, he thanked everyone for their contribution. This isn't merely an award for me. It represents all of us, he declared, the pride seeping into every word. We've redefined the narrative together. Let's carry this momentum forward, fostering an environment where everyone feels empowered to bring their best ideas to life. As the applause filled the room, a glance in Emily's direction confirmed his journey had come full circle. He had not just achieved professional transformation, he had settled into a self-confidence deeply rooted in authentic experiences, transcending limitations he had previously embraced. Frank felt ready to embrace the next chapter of his journey, not as a janitor stepping into a conference room, but as a leader shaping a legacy. And within him lay the knowledge. Each shift he had made contributed to this unprecedented impact. With restored clarity, Frank recognized he was no longer merely the janitor who had inspired a company.
He had become the embodiment of possibility for all those who followed. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click counts in this journey.
Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this transformational journey. You need to subscribe now. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.